Hey, what is going on, guys? Worst Trends here.
Worst trends, my dear friend. It seems like you neglected to say your iconic catchphrase in the previous video.
You owe it to the viewers to make up for it and play it again now.
Fine, whatever.
Hey, what is going on, guys? Worst Trends here.
AIB was one of the first object shows I've ever watched. If I'm not mistaken, it would be my fourth, behind BFDI, II, and Battle for the Respective Roboti, which in all honesty is a show I would much rather be talking about right now. Not because AIB is bad, but because when I made that poll all that time ago, I'd forgotten how long these episodes really were. Each one clocking in at about 30 minutes. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to do a 30-minute review like this show probably deserves, and that's because, say it with me everyone, I'm working on a video reviewing and ranking every episode of BFDI! As you could imagine, working on two big projects at the same time would be torture. I'm not really going to be going episode by episode, but instead more of an overview of the 5 episodes released right now. If you guys enjoyed the video enough, I'll come back to AIB and give it another look once this other thing is good and done with. But for now, a 10-minute overview is all you're getting. Hey man, I don't make the rules, I just create them. Animated Inanimate Battle, or AIB, is an object show created by Robert Johnston, with a T. Its first episode released almost exactly 4 years ago on May 20th, 2020. Since then, 5 episodes have been released over the span of 2 years, each one getting a respectable million views, sometimes more. However, the series has fallen into a hiatus since 2022, and there's no sign of it coming back anytime soon. But it hasn't been officially cancelled yet, so there's still hope. I've seen more miraculous revivals from these shows, like Battle for the Respective Roboti or Battle for Caution's McGriddle, so I'm confident that it'll come back someday. The show is hosted by Oodle the Doodle. If he's anything like that other doodle I know, then we're in for a rough time. This show consists of 60 characters, and get this, they're competing in a competition show for a prize. Okay, I'm done with the synopsis, let's get to the review. You'd expect to start with episode 1, but there's actually a pilot to this show. One that I refuse to watch because it's 15 minutes of reading captions. This fandom is filled with children. I don't have the patience to sit through that, let alone little Billy on his mom's iPad. But the first episode expects you to have already watched it because it starts off with all the characters getting their voices and limbs, which were absent in the pilot. Unfortunately, that means our introduction to these characters are them screaming and panicking over their new voices, which can be funny, but it's just not a good way to kick off a series. There's an episode of this show that makes it extremely difficult to talk about, and that's because its two halves are wildly different in quality. So let's start with episodes 1 and 2 first. The first 2 episodes are, in all honesty, kinda underwhelming. There's 60 characters in this show, but only like 20 of them do anything of interest in these first 2 episodes. The other 40 or so just sink into the background and are entirely irrelevant. Everyone remembers the classic characters of Harp, Teabag, Hanger, and Pine Needle, right? Well, no, because they do nothing but fill slots. A good chunk of these characters are just one note. There were a handful that I enjoyed, like, and. But most of them just have one character trait and they stick with that. Filmy is dramatic, Bacon is southern, Blanket is a shy uwu girl, Whoopee Cushion is just cheese for my eye.
Okay, but what is your personality?
I guess the upside of having boring characters is that I don't hate any of them. Actually, scratch that, Popsicle Sticks suck. She's just a stand for jelly and that's all she does, and it gets very annoying. There was such an easy way to make these characters more memorable that just about every object show uses, except this one. And that, my friends, is picking teams. Unlike just about every other object show, the teams here are randomized, which means we don't get to watch these characters do much of anything outside the challenge in episode 1. If there were just 5 minutes dedicated to the contestants walking around and interacting, getting in conflicts, forming friendships, then that would have made each one just that more memorable. But since it's random, these characters and thus these teams just blend together. When you just list off names as the teams are chosen, it doesn't make a single one of them stand out. These teams are so unmemorable. I think a good comparison to this is the team picking in Teapot 1. This scene sets up so many dynamics for the season, such as basketball's rivalry with golf ball or book finding new friends. Finding reasons for these characters to be on the same team will directly result in them having better dynamics with each other, but this isn't the case here. Team 3 is boring because it's completely built upon everyone hating Bone, and that's the only source of conflict, rivalry, or friendship on this team. That's because it was built plot first, characters second. Most of the characters act like they've never met before, which means there are almost no pre-existing relationships between them. Something as simple as having a character walk up, ask to join, and then being accepted instantly forms some sort of bond between those two characters. In a later episode, one of the the characters, Nabla, starts talking about how awful Aleph is. But up to this point, we really haven't seen Aleph do anything that bad. The worst he's done is pushing Nabla's chalkboard into the water, which isn't really that bad because Nabla was being presented as bossy in that scene. What I'm saying is, this character doesn't feel mean because he hasn't done anything mean. And I don't care what Nabla has to say because I have no reason to feel bad for her. Imagine though, if when the teams are being picked, the two are forced to join the same team for some reason, and we get to see Aleph directly bully Nabla for no reason. And stuff like this applies to just about every dynamic in the show. And then, of course, the team names. I'll quickly list them off. Team 1, Team 2, Team 3, Team 4, Team 5, and Team 6. Seriously? Since all these team names are just numbers, none of them stand out. I constantly find myself confused on what teams have already lost or what characters are on which team. At the very least, the teams should have been named something generic but unique from each other, like how BFDI did it with the squashy grapes and squishy cherries. Then we have the 2 challenges, which are pretty generic. I'm not saying nothing interesting is done with them, it's just that these aren't very creative concepts. Standing on a block above water and pushing a boulder up a cliff aren't exactly groundbreaking. This leaves a bad starting point for the show, and I was so quick to call it bad. In my notes, I straight up wrote down, way too ambitious, solely for the fact there are way too many characters. But damn, I was proven wrong. Episode 3 and 4 are actually really great, and episode 5 is fantastic. First up, the challenges. I hope you don't miss the safe, boring challenges from the first 2 episodes, because from now on, each challenge is super creative and fun. Starting with episode 3, all but one member of each team has their limbs removed and are put in a claw machine. The one limbed member is tasked with getting them all out using the claw. This is the best way a challenge can do the only one person per team competes style. Compare this to BFB8. Since only one contestant is allowed to buzzer per team, it leaves tons of people doing absolutely nothing and just sitting around. But since the other contestants are still integral to the challenge here, we get to see them interact with the claw user. This challenge is mostly dialogue based rather than action based like the last 2. I personally enjoy both, but clearly this show needed to flesh out its characters, which it does in spades. Episode 4 is similar in terms of the dialogue to action ratio. The problem is that it's basically BFB4. I'm sorry to keep bringing up that show, but they're both art contests about depicting a specific character, and they're both episode 4. I mean, come on guys, you can't blame me for this one. This gets more creative though because there are no art supplies given to the teams. Instead, contestants must use themselves as art supplies. This is a really cool idea, if a bit unbalanced for some of the teams. Episode 5 see the contestants finding a specific object in order to be safe. That may seem generic, but the object is actually pieces of the sun, which is destroyed earlier in the episode. Because of this, the entire episode takes place in darkness, which is a nice change of pace. I personally am getting sick of every object show taking place in the same grassy field. AIB does something a little different though by taking place in a void. Each challenge has a new area being created. An ocean, a mountain, etc. The challenges slowly fill the world as you go along, which is really cool. However, this does result in the background being pretty empty, especially in the first few episodes. I'm sure that by the end of the season though, it'll be a complete world, and that's cool. The characters start getting a lot more attention, it's just a lot of little things. A vast amount of the characters just start doing more, and I find myself picking favorites, when before I was pretty indifferent to all of them. The best one though has to be Album. Even in episodes 1 and 2, she was still great. She was the only contestant to feel like a real character, not just a single trait. She has a bit of a rivalry with Coconut, and she's definitely one of the more level-headed and reasonable characters in the show. Those are always my favorites. Other improvements are Nacho, who changes personality based on what cheese is on his head, Leek, Ketchup, and Frisbee, who all get involved with the Aleph versus Nabla thing, and then there's Pear. Hold on, wait a minute, I didn't like that. Okay, so in episode 3, Pitchfork throws a big tantrum and gets the team put up for elimination. Obviously, this would mean that Pitchfork would be eliminated, but she had just started this arc with Glowstick, so it would be a bad time for her to go. Instead, Pear has this giant speech on why he hates the competition and hates Oodle. This, in turn, pisses Oodle off, and he immediately eliminates Pear. Although the votes aren't shown, it's implied that Pitchfork was eliminated. The points Pear makes is that Oodle forces them to play the game and constantly puts them through hell. But the thing is, no one else seems to hate what's going on.
Is putting everyone at each other's throats. We're miserable. I mean, I'm not the only one thinking this, right?
We didn't really have lives before this started.
See, that says it all right there. I think the goal is to have the contestants distrust Oodle, but this feels a little early, does it not? I mean, this show is supposed to be like 60 episodes long, and this is episode 4. We get a tease of an evil version of Oodle in the same episode. I personally think something like this should happen a little later down the line. But you know what? Ignore me. I'm sure they've got this all planned out. I also want to focus on the humor real quick. Unlike just about everything else, the jokes are pretty consistent throughout each episode. It relies on sound effects a lot, which can be funny at times, but since this is a relatively serious show, it's just kinda jarring. A great example of this is after Pear's big speech. Doodle throws him in the Doodleverse. The atmosphere is super intense. This is then immediately followed up by a jaguar growl sound effect. Meme sound effects should only be used in a show that's 100% a joke, but that's just my opinion. It's a shame too, because some jokes are written really well. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of dialogue that's actually really funny and catches me off guard. But for every one of those, there's 10 more instances of a random ass meme sound effect being used. It's really not that big of a deal, but it just kind of takes me out of it. Sound effects are far more fitting for a show like Kobu. And I know this is a really bad time to bring this up, due to recent events, but at the end of each episode after the credits, a dialogue clip will be used, like Dan Schneider.
You have a scratch right there.
I like my voice.
You're a demon!
I like my voice.
Sorry. Did you know this show is animated in PowerPoint? That is insane! Before I knew that, I thought the animation was solid, but the fact this was made in what's basically Google Slides is insane. I think it's honestly more impressive than if it was done in Adobe. I don't use PowerPoint, so I don't know how easy or hard it is to animate in it, but some of these shots look like they're impossible to make in that software. Just look at this shot. The animation in the first few episodes is good, but a little slow. But episodes 4 and 5 look just as good, or even better than any show animated in a real animation software, like Adobe or ToonSquid or whatever. And because this is made in a slideshow, the intro can easily be edited, which means that each episode, the intro changes depending on what's happening in the show. Assets are changed, other objects appear, some little details here and there added in. I've always wanted a show to have a dynamic intro, so finally getting one is a dream come true. I don't ask for much. Weirdly though, in the beginning of the intro, Oodle gets sucked into the Star of David. Was that done on purpose? Is Oodle Jewish? Wait a minute, but that would make Evil Doodle. You know what, never mind. So I just looked at my notes and I have 3 small things I want to mention, so I'll just rattle them off real quick. The elimination area is really unique, and although I'm not talking about the shorts, the one about the Doodleverse is really cool and reuses the setting well. In episode 4 there's no more viewer voting, and it becomes a contestant vote. I personally prefer viewer voting, but I can't blame them for wanting more control. And finally, the ending in episode 5 is really spectacular, and if the rest of the show is able to be as good as those last 7 minutes, then this could be one of the best episodes I've ever seen. So Animatic Battle. So animated Inanimate Battle. At its beginning, it was a fairly lackluster and generic show, but as it went along, it found its footing very fast and improved on just about every complaint I have. Each episode being as long as they are, combined with the animation and heaps of interesting ideas, makes this one of the more impressive object shows I've seen in a long time. Honestly, I wasn't very excited to make this video when I got chosen for the poll, but now that I've actually watched the thing, I'm glad I got picked. And I want to start doing a little tier list of every object show I talk about. So far, this is the 3rd one. The other 2 being Animatic Battle and Crayon Object Battle Universe. Kobu goes in S tier, obviously. I'll put Animatic Battle in A. I'm considering every episode in these shows, so it's possible that the rankings will change as time goes on. I think I'm going to put AIB in B tier. It gets dragged down a bit by the first 2 episodes. I assure you that as more episodes are released, it's only going to get higher. I'm going to be holding another poll to decide what show I review next, so make sure to keep an eye on the community page if you want to say in that. It should be posted at the same time this video did, so head over there now if you feel like.
Okay, so I didn't really know what to put for an ending joke, so I guess thanks for watching.